Mike Owens here. Today I'm joined by one of the greatest minds and greatest coaches in the game, Eric Nicksick, the head coach of Extreme Couture. And I would try and name some of his fighters, but the list is too long. Eric, great to sit down and chat as always. How are things with you today?
Doing well, Mike, man. It's good to see you, bro.
Good to see you too, my friend. Look, we're at the start of 2023. Can you give me a quick review of 2022 in the minds of Eric Nicksick and Extreme Couture?
I was very happy with 2022. You know, it obviously started off great with Francis Ngannou, a big win over cirylgane. I think a week later we backed it up with the Sean Strickland win. And then Rafion Stotts, we had our title with Juan Archuleta. We defended the title again. And then the camps with Aljamain, we beat Piotr Jan and TJ Dillashaw. So championship stuff prowess wise, man, it was been a super busy year for the gym. And then, Eddie Bracco, Dennis Davis, Nate, the rest of the boys here at Extreme Couture, those guys were all grinding and everybody was eating, man. That's what to me was important, was the whole team was flourishing.
Of the 52 weeks in the year, let's say the 52 weekends, how many do you get free? And what I mean by that is how many weeks of the 52 do you not have a fighter booked to fight?
Man, it's pretty slim. Like I just started my schedule, wrote out my schedule yesterday for February, March, and April, and I have 2 weekends off in 3 months. So the entire roster at the gym, is fighting. We got guys all over the place, and I mean, the good thing is we're all busy, and it's a good problem to have.
Of course, of course. Look, you mentioned Francis's name at the start, and it's kind of where I'd like to kind of begin some of the topics I want to cover through today. Obviously, very high profile situation with the heavyweight champion and a good friend of yours, and obviously a student in many ways, leaving the UFC. A big news story. A lot's been said. A lot's gone on. What's it been like from your perspective? Have you seen this situation unfold over the last few weeks and months?
It's definitely been mixed emotions, I think, for me, Mike, because as a coach, your job is to kind of get to this point. Obviously, with Francis beating Stipe, beat cirylgane, and his skill set continually to improve. And as a coach, you definitely wanted to see that where we're able to go and compete against who I think is the best to ever do it in MMA. That part as a coach does kind of suck. You're like, oh man, like I wanted this opportunity to game plan and go out and compete against Jon Jones, and we're not going to get that opportunity on March 4th. Maybe in the future we will. But at the other side of that coin, I just know a lot behind the scenes that went on with the negotiation process, and just where Francis wasn't comfortable in signing, and some of the pitfalls, I guess, into that contract and things that he just didn't agree with. And I'm actually very proud of him for taking a stance. And the numbers were good right on the front end, but there was other things like incentives that, had he lost to Jon Jones, where his contract goes to. And dude, just none of it made sense. Like it didn't make sense. Like I'm fighting arguably the best to ever do it. And if I lose, I get dropped all the way down to here. Like, no way. Like he was all at the risk to this thing. So, and then he talked about the difference between employee and independent contractors, where the sponsorships are, getting somebody to help come in and negotiate some of these things. So I don't know, man. I'm really proud of him. All in all, like for me, I think deep down I would love to stay in the UFC and be able to compete. But he's my guy, and I stand by his decision.
No, of course, 100%. I checked the record. This is the first time in 19 years where a UFC champion has left the organization as the belt holder. It goes back to BJ Penn in 2004. With that being said, a large part of this has been the negotiation and kind of the to and fro between both parties and what the UFC were offering compared to what Francis desired. With that being said, how damaging do you think this situation is to the UFC brands, given the heavyweight champion and the baddest man on the planet, some of the terms that have been offered to him?
It's tough to say. I mean, they're a machine and they just keep churning it out. Like the Dana White was able to dodge a domestic violence, video and really come out of this thing unscathed. And then, so for me, like, I don't think Francis in a month or two is going to even be a blip on the radar. You got to think how, in my opinion, how the news cycle was spun. There was no fights for however long between Christmas and January, right? And then this happened on New Year's Eve. So for 2 weeks, UFC was looking for something to take the target off of Dana's back, and they needed something to be announced. They needed to make something big and a splash. And I think part of that is, hey, we have to move on from Francis. that's going to make a news story. And then the Jon Jones and Ngannou matchup is going to make a news story. So I think it was kind of that perfect storm just to move the narrative.
No, 100%. That's something that I think a lot of people picked up on. The key word from Francis's side of the story, and I will move off this topic. I realise it's quite a delicate situation, but the key word from Francis's side has been freedom. That seems to be the word that's most associated with Francis. I'd like to know, as someone who knows him so well, why is freedom so important to a man like Francis Ngannou?
I just think you have to look at his history, you know, and where he's been from and where he comes from and what he's fought for. So, you know, the intimate conversations that we've had about his upbringing and, you know, where he's at in his life now, I know that he's very happy and financially he's well ahead of where he ever dreamed of. So he's not moved by money. That's evident. And if he were to be moved by money, he would have signed a deal a long time ago. He's moved by change and making a difference and doing things to help the people that were behind him and try to pave the way. You know, he had an idea where he was talking about like the francisngannou Act, you know, or doing some things to help out with getting these fighters, these men and women, medical insurance. Because I remember one of our teammates getting hurt, and he was like, it kind of, you know, for Francis, it like hurt his feelings that this fighter couldn't afford to get the surgery done. You know, he's like, how is this even possible? Like, how is this even fair? And the fighter was in the UFC, you know? So there's just so many injustices that I think that he just wasn't willing to budge on. And, you know, he said, he's like, look, I have like 5 or 6 things. I know maybe I'll get 1 or 2 of them. But if I get 0, I'm not re-signing. So he was hoping to get 1 or 2 things done, and they couldn't even budge on that. So, you know, proud of him, man. He made a decision to stick by his guns, and he did just that.
No, 100%. If we look to the future, there's kind of 2 ways this can go. He can go to another MMA organization and compete in the same sport he's been doing, or he can go to what's probably more likely, which is the boxing realm. How is, given the money that's been offered by the UFC and the money that would be offered in other organizations, is boxing the only next move for Francis?
I think it makes sense to be his first move after this, you know. And the hard part is that we were just, you know, in the gym right before Christmas, and he looked amazing. His MMA game was amazing. He was mixing everything together, and how much he loves MMA. He loves the arts, the kicking, the jiu-jitsu, the grappling, the rest. Like, he loves it all. And that's actually something he said to me. He's like, man, like, now I just go into a realm where it's just only boxing, you know? So I know that part did kind of bug him in the sense because he's getting so good in all these other areas, and he's not going to be able to really show that. But when it comes to the money standpoint, I mean, that was something we talked about too. He's like, if I fight Jon Jones, I make X. If I lose to Jon Jones, my next fight, I make X and Y. And he goes, but if I go and box, then I make triple the money that I would have made fighting these. So just, you know, all these things came up that just felt like, you know, for him, the next move should be boxing, you know? So that's kind of what I think he's looking at right now. And he's going to weigh all of his options when he gets back home.
No, 100%. Last question on this subject. I do want to move from it. Obviously, there's a lot of ways this could go great for Francis in terms of monetary gain, in terms of potentially winning the heavyweight championship in boxing. How big of a risk do you think this move is? Because it's very bold and it's very daring in many ways, but it is a risk nonetheless. Little technical difficulty there, but as I was saying, Eric, how big of a risk do you think this is for Francis? Like, there's a lot to gain, but there's potentially a lot to lose.
Yeah, you know, honestly, Mike, I think it really has to do with the opponent, who we decide. If he doesn't go in box, which opponent makes the most amount of sense. And I think that obviously, like, the big 3 makes a lot of sense, where it'd be Wilder, anthonyjoshua, and Tyson Fury. So, you know, if he goes out and decides to box one of these guys, I don't think there's a shame in losing to any of them in a boxing match, you know? So I don't think it devalues you very much. But if you go out and box somebody that really doesn't have the name value or name recognition, then yeah, I think it really devalues your leverage that you had, you know, prior to leaving the UFC. So I think it needs to make sense. It needs to make sense for Francis on who he decides and who promotes it.
No, 100%. I want to move the conversation from a fighter that I know you're extremely close with to another fighter you're extremely close with, because danige got a massive win on the first UFC card back in 2023, 2nd round knockout over Damon Jackson. A lot of similarities to the Gavin Tucker fight in terms of people doubting Dan and all of that. So I won't ask you a question in as much as I'd just like you to explain the emotions after Dan's win over Damon Jackson.
Yeah, it was definitely emotional. I think twofold. Obviously, the fact of where we were at with our back against the wall and Dan losing, 3 straight, but also because Puna lost the fight before, for me. So like, Puna's like my son. Both of them are. Like, I love them like my own kids. And, I told Dan before I walked out with Puna, I said this to Dan, but I was moreover saying it for myself too, as like a reassurance, like, hey, we're never too high, we're never too low. Because Puna could go in there and knock this dude clean out, and then our energy's through the roof and we're celebrating, and then we go in the back, and then that carries over in a negative too, being too excited and too up. But had he lost, like, well, I didn't want to come back too negative or too down either. So I said that to Dan before I walked out. I was like, hey, never too high, never too low. Whatever happens here, we hit the reset button, we go. But I was almost kind of saying that to reassure myself. But seeing him execute the game plan flawlessly, man, like every little thing that we prepared for, we expected, we saw. We expected Damon Jackson to come with that right knee, heavy right knee up the midline, because Dan tends to duck his head over there, so we saw that a lot. We traced him and we tracked him down, but we never chased. He stayed right in front of him. He didn't get overzealous on a lot of things. He actually, in my mind, he was like almost like a just like a lot of ways like a predator stalking his prey, taking his time and poking and prodding and waiting for that perfect moment. And we work a lot of counter reloads for Dan, because that's a lot of the things that he's great at. And he caught that hook on his rear shoulder, and his left hook was open, and Damon Jackson made the fatal flaw of basically showing the uppercut that it was coming. So Dan was able to beat him to the inside, and it was just it was a wrap.
No, 100%, 100%. Was that the best danige that we've ever seen in the octagon?
Man, I've seen him better. I mean, as of late, but I've seen this dude. Oh man, I've seen that guy. Like, one he didn't get a finish in this fight, but it was I think it was like a 30-25 or something. Like, this Dan beat the brakes off this dude on a regional scene. And everything that he did was absolutely flawless. His Contender Series fight, I thought, was a masterpiece fight. So obviously Gavin Tucker with the one-hitter quitter was a great fight. So I for me, man, I could sit and point at all of them and give you reasons why I liked it. But I think because of the severity of where we're at with the back against the wall, Damon Jackson coming in hot, I think he was off of 4 straight wins. It definitely ranks up there in one of the best performances I've seen out of Dan.
100%. If we move to the main event fighter of that card, Sean Strickland, what a wild man. Let's just say it. Can you walk me through a fight week when a fighter takes a fight on a week's notice, particularly a main event, particularly upper weight class?
Oh, he spars all week, like all fight week. Like, he sparred on Thursday, the Thursday of fight week, and I'm on the phone with Mick Maynard, and Mick's like, he's doing what? I was like, he's sparring right now. And he goes, dude, don't let this guy get hurt, because like I need this guy fighting. And I swear to you, Mike, this is what this guy does, bro. Like, that's how he stays in shape. That's how he trains. He just spars all day long. So he's definitely broken the mold, I think, for our thoughts and theories and our ideologies when it comes to MMA and fight week. But that's what makes him so great is, we lost a Cannoneer. He's right back in the gym, takes 4 days off. He comes back in to help Brad Tavares and Puna get ready for their fights. And then I think by doing so, it made us feel more comfortable in being able to take that fight on short notice. And the fact that they didn't really make us cut any weight. So we're like, shit, we'll take it. 205, no problem. So I think that was an error on their part, but we took advantage of it.
When you talk about Sean Strickland constantly sparring, what severity of sparring is that? Are we talking hard sparring? Are we talking like kill shots, or are we talking like touching sparring?
No, there's only one way he spars, and that's hard. There's no, like, he'll tell you that. Like, I'll see him flow. Like, there's times he'll flow with guys, but it's for what the guy needs, the training partner needs, right? So like, if there's a guy that's like, hey, Sean, can we flow? Sean will flow with you, and he'll give you the look you need. But if it's for Sean and Sean wants to spar hard, he's going to get a guy and say, hey, look, and I'll tell you straight up, hey, I'm fighting, and I want you to try to knock me out. And we'll spar with Edmund Taverdian. We'll spar with whoever. Marvin Vittori was in town, and he's like, hey, Marvin, I need you, and I want you to try to knock me out. And Marvin's like, no problem. And they're in there banging it away. And I'm just like, oh my God, dude, we're literally 3 days away from a fucking fight. And Sean's in here trying to knock out Marvin.
As a man who knows Sean Strickland a lot better than 99.9% of the planet, give me your wildest Sean Strickland story.
Oh, dude, like I don't know, man. The guy is well. What was it? So the last time I think it might have been the Perea fight, and I was like, he was late for cutting weight. I was like, dude, we're cutting weight at this time. Like, where are you at? And it was, I think it was in July, so it was the summertime. And he's like, oh, sorry, man, I was out in the desert having sex. I was like, what? What were you doing? He's like, yeah, I was in the desert where I was having sex with this girl in the desert. I was like, all right, bro, let's get back to the gym. Let's start getting this weight cut going. He's just dude, he's a fucking wild man. And that's what I love about him is like, hey, let him be the way he is. But we have an understanding. It's like, hey, if I have to reel you in, if I have to grab you by your ear and tell you, like, listen, there's times when things are important and they're dire, and I need your attention, your full attention. You have to respect that too. I'm gonna let you be the way that you are, but when it's time to go, it's time to go. And he's like, you got it, bro. I understand that. So that was a lot of what happened this fight. I was like, listen, I just need 20 seconds of your time in the corner. 20 seconds. I don't even ask for the whole minute, bro. Just give me 20 seconds.
No, 100%. Technically, that may have been cutting weight as well. That is technically cardio out in the desert. So I'll
very
put
much
that
so.
in. Let's move a little bit from the past to the future, because I've heard some rumors today that Aljamainsterling is back in action, UFC 287 against henrycejudo. Just give me a little bit of a stylistic breakdown of that fight for your guy, and what are kind of the keys to victory for Aljo in this matchup?
I think Aljo kind of staying on the same trend with his footwork and movement. Never really being in the same place and poking and prodding. I'm really interested to see how this grappling plays out. I understand Henry is an Olympic wrestler, but this isn't the Olympics and this isn't freestyle wrestling, right? Like, this is MMA. So I think the grappling is going to be a lot closer than what it seems to be stylistically. Well, Henry does a really good job of getting inside on guys and working his body and then coming back up to the head. He almost kind of reminds me of like a danige in a lot of ways with stature, I think it's going to be a real technical fight. I really do. And, I think sitting down with Aljo and breaking this down is going to be a lot of fun for me, because I have the utmost respect for Henry and what he does, man. He's an absolute stud for a reason. And, but I think Aljo's footwork movement, his being elusive on the outside, is going to frustrate Henry, and we're going to have to do some things about that when making our entries.
100%. A lot of people call Aljamain the master of the back in MMA, and that was probably most evident in the fight against Jan, where he proved everybody wrong, like we last talked about. How important will taking the back be for Aljamain to have success and ultimately in this fight?
Well, you think about anatomy, with Aljo, he's super long legs and arms. So when he gets into that body lock positions, really the round is kind of stymied. You don't see a whole lot of guys getting out of there. So, I think Henry and his camp will be working really hard on those positions and how to reverse them and then get Aljo on his back. Like, those are the things there where I think for us, when we get to the back position, is being aggressive, looking to flatten him out and try to apply some ground and pound, and then look for the submissions off the ground and pound. So, it'll be an interesting cat and mouse game, but that's definitely something I think that Aljo's best attribute is the backpack, the back game that he gets to, because his transitions off of there, and man, like, he's like Max Roshkoff. When Max gets on your back and he works that body triangle series on you, man, it sucks. Like, your ribs and your breathing, and he's poking at you, he's elbowing you, he's doing things. It's almost like a nuisance back there. So it'll be interesting. Certainly be interesting to see how they play this.
Last one on this subject, because there's a common theme going on in terms of these major fights, is comebacks. Henry's obviously making his comeback after a few years out. Jon Jones will be back after 3 years. Are you a believer in ring rust? I presume that you are, and if so, how do you negate the effects of time off the cage?
Oh, that's a great question, Mike, and I think it matters on what have you been doing in that time off. So, I think Henry in particular, you can point at him and look at back and go, oh, well, this guy's been coaching, and you see him on the mats training, and he's breaking down videos, he's doing things, he's constantly evolving. Not saying Jon hasn't. Maybe Jon's been doing more of that behind the scenes. But in my opinion, it's almost like when you get an injury, like Casey O'Neill, for example, when she got injured, the first thing I told her, I was like, hey, make sure you're coming into the gym. Be in the gym, be active. But that means you're coaching, you're helping cornering, but you're being around the team and building that camaraderie. But it also helps you maintain your mental reps. So you're watching the drills, you're doing those things. So you're not just completely taking yourself out of the game. So I think it's going to be important for that fighter to avoid ring rust by how active were they during that time that they were off.
No, 100%. Last one from me, the last subject I want to touch, and you can take this question however you like it. Give me your thoughts on the slap league.
And I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not a big fan of, I just don't see how it makes any sense to have somebody hold their hands behind their back and then just take blunt force trauma to the ear and to the face. To me, there's no defense, there's no style, there's no countering, there's nothing really to it other than like, hey, this big old Olympic powerlifter is going to try to, give me a TBI. And then if I live, then then I get my turn, So I just don't find any grace in it at all, and I think that it almost in a lot of ways, Mike, it feels like it takes MMA a step back, very, very primitive. And seeing some of the knockouts and the posturing, dude, like, I was looking at some neurosurgeon commenting on it, just how awful this has got to be on the brain health, man. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
I don't know if you've seen the comments that came out yesterday, but Eric Spicely, UFC vet, was offered supposedly a place on it, and he said that the pay rate was 2 to show and 2 to win. When you hear that, because I think we all presume that the pay grade would be particularly low, but when you hear that, how much of these emotions that you have, the negative emotions you have, emphasized?
Well, you as the fighter have to understand that the risk reward. We were offered, Taylor Gordado was offered a spot on this, and when they told me what the pay was, I'm like, this makes 0 cents. 0 cents for me to put this girl in this position. Now, if it was 15 and 15 and she was at a time in her career where she can use the money, and I would present that to her. But the moment they told me that too, it was 2 and 2 for her. And I was like, Mick, like, I'm not putting my girl in this. And he actually, he agreed with me. He's like, no, I understand. But I'm like, it makes 0 sense for me to even ask her if she wants to go do this, right? To possibly get knocked out. And what does it do to your future of your brain health and where does that put you? How far does that put you behind with concussions? And so it just makes 0 sense to me, and to me, it's like, it's not hypocritical by any means when it comes to MMA, because you have the option and the ability to block and slip and roll and catch and counter. Whereas this, you don't have that option. You're holding your hands behind your back and you're just waiting to get hit in the fucking head. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
No, I completely agree, and it wasn't the subject I wanted to end our conversation on, so I'll leave it there. But the last one from me, Eric, we're at the start of 2023 now. It's a big year ahead for Extreme Couture. What are your goals personally in your career? What do you want to accomplish in the next 12 months?
Oh, that's easy, man. I got a good crop of young kids, some that just recently made it into the UFC, and some that are right on the outsides of those. To help them realize their full potential. And I like to end the year off with, like, for example, when Chris Curtis, we got him in the UFC, he got his wins, and now he's ranked in the top 15 in the UFC. Like, that was a great goal of ours. Taylor Gordado, again, like, we got her in the PFL. She made it all the way to the finals. So a lot of my goals revolve around, I guess, helping these fighters realize their full potential, but ultimately changing their lives and giving them an opportunity to go and perform on the highest stage, but getting some financial relief behind it, putting them in a position that where we can leave them better off, and making better men and women. Like, when I look at danige, it's not the fighter that I'm proud of, it's the man that I'm proud of. Like, he inspires me in a lot of ways. He's a great husband and he's a great dad, and that's what I want from our fighters, is guys that we can change and turn them in something better once their fight career is over, that we help them on that journey of life rather than just the MMA side of things.
That's amazing. And that's why we all love the sport, and that we all hope for all of the fighters. So, Eric, I know I've taken up a lot of your time. I really appreciate it, as always. It's always a pleasure to get your time. And if we don't speak again, then I wish you the best of luck in all your next set of fighters before we do this again in the next few months' time.
Yeah, you hit me up anytime you need, Mike. I got you.
Before we finish, Eric, how can people find you on social media, and any sponsors you'd like to plug? The floor is yours for the last word. Eric_XCMMA, both handles for Twitter and Instagram. So find me on there and hit me up. Especially I love when people ask questions or they got comments about the game, and I'm always available to talk.